Now we move on to our first news. A Chinese delegation will visit Brussels on Thursday for talks with the European Union over Beijing's new export curbs on rare earths, vital materials for the auto, electronics and defense industries. This is what Antonio Costa, European Council President, has said.
As you know, we are very concerned about the trade relationship with China, and especially the recent measures that China adopt to export control of critical raw materials. And the high-level delegation from China is going to Brussels in the coming weeks, and we hope to address this in the proper. Also with China, we want to have a good trade relations, but in fact, we have some problems that we raise and we need to address, and China knows very well what kind of problems we are facing and what China needs to do to overcome this situation.
Meanwhile, EU leaders, including Ursula von der Leyen, has urged Beijing to act as a responsible partner and lift barriers that threaten trade stability. China's Prime Minister Li Qiang, on the other hand, has signaled readiness for dialogue, saying Beijing is open to resolving economic issues and boosting cooperation in green and digital sectors. The EU is also accelerating efforts to reduce dependence on Chinese rare earths by recycling and forming new partnerships with countries such as Canada, Australia, and Ukraine. Now for this discussion, we welcome Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Raymond, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this with growing concerns in Europe over trade imbalances and security with China, can they rebuild trust with each other, or are they entering a new era of economic decoupling?
Well, thanks very much for having me. You know, peace and prosperity must be waged just like war. That means you have to have a strategy and you must have partners. What has happened, particularly since the rise of the Trump administration in the United States, is to throw out the multilateral system, which has served the world very well since World War II, a multilateral system in which there is consensus building and there are international rules in terms of trade, in terms of tariffs, in terms of embargoes, restrictions on exports, and so forth. All of that has been thrown out of the window in favor of a bilateral transactional approach, which President Trump exemplifies. And the latest disputes over rare earth, of course, are a part of the ongoing bilateral dispute between the United States and China. Europe gets caught in the crosshairs because the export regulations which China's imposed, even though they are aimed specifically at the United States, affect Europe as well. So in this new era in which we are trying to maintain stability both economically and strategically, Europe has to be able to negotiate on a bilateral basis with China, just as each other nation in the world has to do that. And I would emphasize that economic and strategic matters are joined at the hip. It is not the case that you can consider economic matters separately from the strategic and military. In fact, as has been shown in the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the whole sanctions question there, these two considerations, economic and security, are very much related. It is to be hoped that the EU will be able to take a leadership program forward with the Chinese. There is also hope that in the upcoming discussions on Thursday between Xi and President Trump, that there will be some return to principles in terms of international trade rather than just might makes right. If I have the ability to restrict something which somebody else needs, if I have the ability to exclude people from my market, then my might will make right. That is not the way forward for the world, and it is a very, very disconcerting development, which is exemplified most recently in the tussle over rare earths, and more broadly, the bilateral tariffs which President Trump has tried to impose on the rest of the world.
Yes, indeed. And also looking at China, bringing China to this discussion, Raymond, how do you think, to what extent do China's rare earth policies reflect its own geopolitical leverage versus domestic economic priorities?
Well, it is at this point totally in the international leverage field. There are people in the United States who are decrying China's resort to restrictions on rare earth as blackmail. Well, why should one be amazed or surprised that if you threaten 100% tariffs, as President Trump has on China, that they don't look around for an economic weapon to be able to try to counteract that? And that is what has happened. Now, I think originally China developed its rare earth industry not as an international tool, but because it wanted to be a leader in the technologies of the future, whether that be electrical vehicles, whether it be renewable power. All of these things required rare earth. The United States and Europe were asleep at the switch, really, in regard to rare earths, and are now just waking up to the fact that you can't not depend, if you have a strategic competition with China, on China for a critical mineral for going forward in technology, in computer chips, electrical vehicles, as I say, a whole range of technologies which require these inputs.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Raymond, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we move on. Hungary's Foreign Minister Petro Szijjártó has announced that Prime Minister Viktor Orban will discuss Russian energy and U.S. sanctions with U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington next week. He has also stated that initial stage discussions had already taken place between the Hungarian Prime Minister and U.S. officials earlier regarding energy supply issues. Let's listen in.
Kérdés. Ami a mi energiállátásunkat illeti, nem vagyok híve semmifajta üzengetésnek. Ezt a kérdést én személyesen többször végigbeszéltem Marco Rubioval, a miniszterelnök végigbeszélte az amerikai elnökkel. Lesz lehetőség a jövő hét második felében Washingtonban arra, hogy ezt a kérdést a miniszterelnök személyesen beszélje végig az amerikai elnökkel.
The Hungarian foreign minister has further stressed that there would be a chance next week for the Hungarian Prime Minister to address oil supply issues personally with U.S. President Donald Trump, particularly on sanctions affecting Russian oil companies. Now, this comes as U.S. President Donald Trump imposed sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies, targeting Lukoil and Rosneft, which he claimed was a direct effort to pressure Russia into halting its frontline assaults on Ukraine. Additionally, Hungary is working on ways to circumvent these sanctions without violating them, with Hungarian Prime Minister Orban actively engaging in talks with local energy companies.